open, it began with a promise simple, seductive, impossibly elegant. A single drop of blood, they said, could unlock a universe of medical truth. No needles, no tubes, no waiting rooms. Just clarity, just control. It sounded like the future. It sounded like salvation. And for a brief, blinding moment, millions believed it. But what rises fastest often hides the deepest fractures. And what begins in quiet ambition can end in deafening collapse. This is the story of Theranos, how a miracle was born in gloom, soared into a new kind of American myth, and finally dissolved into dust. In the early 2000s, Silicon Valley was entering a new age of promise. Technology giants were reshaping daily life, startups set records overnight, and the world seemed ready to embrace a generation of visionaries who claimed they could rewrite reality. Into that world stepped Elizabeth Holmes, young, charismatic, relentless. Barely 19 years old, she dropped out of Stanford and proclaimed she had invented a revolutionary technology that could run hundreds of blood tests from a single finger prick. Her company, Theranos, would make medical testing painless, affordable, and accessible to all. It was a bold ambition, so bold that few dared question it. Holmes spoke with unwavering conviction, her voice deep and authoritative, her wardrobe a calculated homage to Steve Jobs. She built an identity around the idea of inevitability, and the world accepted it. Investors flocked, media celebrated her, politicians embraced her. At its height, Theranos was valued at $9 billion. But beneath the optimism and applause lurked a truth too fragile to survive the light. As the earliest days of Theranos felt more like a movement than a company, Holmes cultivated an atmosphere of mission-driven urgency. She spoke about democratizing healthcare, empowering patients, and saving lives. It struck a nerve especially among those dissatisfied with a healthcare system often slow, expensive, and impersonal. She brought in brilliant engineers, seasoned executives, and respected scientists. But the culture she created revolved around secrecy. Employees were siloed, sworn to silence, forbidden to ask too many questions. The technology was guarded as though it were a state secret. The tighter the control, the faster the mystery grew. And mystery, in Silicon Valley, sells. Theranos claimed its proprietary machine, nicknamed the Edison, could run a full panel of blood tests with unprecedented efficiency. Investors poured in hundreds of millions. Walgreens announced a nationwide partnership. News outlets celebrated Holmes as the next titan of innovation. But already in quiet corners and closed rooms, murmurs began. Engineers whispered about failed experiments. Lab workers questioned unreliable results. Doctors raised concerns after receiving suspicious test reports. The foundation was trembling, but few outside could feel it. Foreshadowing lurked in every unanswered question, every locked door, every rushed promise. The early rise wasn't just meteoric, it was unstable. Theranos reached its apex when it stepped into the national spotlight. Holmes was everywhere: magazine covers, television interviews, keynote speeches. She spoke with unnerving confidence, almost rehearsed faith. She described a world in which no one feared needles, in which early detection saved millions of lives, in which her invention would empower the powerless. The public believed. Why wouldn't they? The story was too perfect, too inspiring, too necessary. But with fame came scrutiny. Doctors grew uneasy. Journalists asked sharper questions. Scientists noted the lack of peer-reviewed evidence. Holmes brushed everything aside with calm assurance, dismissing critics as status quo protectors. Inside Theranos, however, the pressure escalated. Machines malfunctioned. Tests produced contradictory results. Employees left in frustration, some even in fear, sensing something deeply wrong. Yet outwardly, Theranos shone brighter than ever. Its peak was a mirage, glittering enormous, and already beginning to crack. Every downfall has a moment, one decisive pivot, where illusion meets truth. For Theranos, that moment arrived with a single article. Investigative journalist John Carrero of the Wall Street Journal released a detailed report alleging that Theranos' technology didn't work. The Edison wasn't performing most tests. Traditional machines were being used behind the scenes. Patient results were dangerously unreliable. The story detonated a global shockwave almost overnight. The illusion unraveled. Regulators launched investigations. Whistleblowers stepped forward. Walgreens terminated its partnership. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services revoked Theranos' lab license. Board members resigned. Investors realized their billions were built on promises rather than proof. Holmes denied everything, insisting the technology was real, insisting the critics were wrong. But reality had shifted. The world no longer accepted her confidence as truth. The downfall wasn't just rapid, it was catastrophic. It was the implosion of a structure built to high on to little. When the dust finally settled, Theranos was a hollow shell. The company dissolved. The technology was exposed as fundamentally flawed. Investors lost fortunes. Patients were left with test results that could not be trusted. Lives were disrupted, careers shattered, reputations destroyed. Holmes and her former partner, Sunny Balwani, faced criminal charges for fraud. Courtrooms replaced conference rooms. Testimony replaced TED Talks. The woman once hailed as the youngest self-made female billionaire now stood trial for deceiving investors and endangering patients. But in the quiet aftermath, a deeper truth emerged, one that reached beyond a single company. Theranos was not just a story of deception, it was a story about belief, about how desperately people long for breakthroughs, about how easily hope can be weaponized. The world had wanted a miracle. Theranos offered one. Few questioned it until it was too late. The company that began with solemn ambition had ended in silence, reduced from visionary promise to a cautionary tale. From boom to dust, every era has its myth stories we cling to, because they promise something better, something easier, something extraordinary. Theranos became one of those myths. It offered transformation without sacrifice, precision without complexity, salvation without struggle. It whispered that the future could be effortless if only we believed enough. But human nature is vulnerable to ground narratives. We chase brilliance, praise confidence, and follow those who claim to know the way. We mistake ambition for ability, charisma for competence, dreams for reality. Theranos' rise was built on a longing for progress. Its fall was built on the weight of truth. This journey from quiet beginnings to meteoric ascent to sudden collapse reveals something timeless. Nothing, no matter how dazzling, is immune to scrutiny. No idea, no leader, no movement can outrun reality forever. All things built on fragile foundations eventually return to dust. And yet, we continue searching. We continue hoping. We continue building. Because the story of Theranos is not just a warning, it is a reminder. Ambition can change the world, but only when grounded in honesty. Failure can devastate, but it can also teach. And impermanence is not a curse, it is a call to create with integrity, to seek truth over illusion, to value progress over spectacle. From gloom to dust, the arc of Theranos reveals both the fragility and resilience of human aspiration. In the end, its legacy is not the promise it made, but the lesson it leaves behind, that even the brightest vision must withstand the light of reality, or else fade into the ashes of its own making.